Hi, this is Joe Bolen, and today we're going to continue our lesson in creating a very simple calculator. In the last lesson, we started the process of designing. We looked at creating our program from the concept of a simple calculator, laying out our user interface, then going in and looking at our pseudocode and some other methods to work on creating a program. And so now let's go into reviewing that and then going into taking what we've learned thus far and begin the process of coding. So you see I had originally our very simple calculator user interface drawing, basically giving it some descriptive control names, telling the programmer what I'm looking forward to seeing in the design. Then I also created a pseudocode, which is nothing more than using my native language, in this case English, to create basically the simple flow of things that need to take place for the different events. I had the add button click event, the subtract button click event, the multiply button click event, divide, and clear button. Each of those had very simple English-like statements that said what kinds of things need to take place during this event. And then also I created what's called an ACE chart, highlighting each button's event. In this case, the add button was the button click event. Some of the variables that I'm going to use under this, I'm going to use first number, second number, and sum for the add. And then I'm going to have to do some action here that we'll code in. And then ultimately I'm going to output this information to the result value label text property, the text property of the result value label. So with that in mind, we were ready to go in and we created our user interface. And here we are in Visual Basic with our very simple calculator user interface. And at this point I've locked the controls by coming up to format locking, and so I won't accidentally bump the controls. And we're really ready to create the code behind it. Let's take a look at the code. I'm going to come over here to Solution Explorer, which is one method to see the code behind it. Then we're going to come up to the bar area and hit View Code. And you'll see basically there is nothing been coded. It's very simple, plain Jane, a public class, main form, in class. Well, we're going to add to that now, and then we're going to take our pseudocode to give us more clarity as to how we need to flow with our program's development. So let's go back to our design, and one of the methods we can do is we can highlight a control. In this case I got the add button highlighted. You'll see it over here in the properties component drop down area, and I can switch over to the events button, but since I'm going to be using the default event, which is the button click event for these, it's easier just to come up and double click on each of the different buttons. So I'm going to double click on the first one, which is the add button on that, and you'll see that I've got the control made for this one, and I'm going to change this to a little bit bigger so you can see it. I'm going to put in a underscore just before the H in handles and hit the enter key. That's a continuation character that allows me to wrap the line down. So I've got this particular event put in. Let's go ahead and put the rest of the events in. So I'm going to come back and go back to the designer, click on the subtract one twice, do the same thing, wrap that down, come back to the designer again, double click on the multiplication one, go back to the design, hit the division, and then finally we'll hit the C for the clear button. And at this point we have all our events for our code in place. And this is the starting point that will get us ready to create the code behind each of those buttons. Now, one of the things we need to do is document our activity when we're creating a program so that we can later on see what it is that we did, and also help other programmers who might be modifying our code to take care of modifying it. So one of the things we need to do at the very beginning, I'm going to come up here to the top line and come up here, and we can start inserting comments. Now comments in Visual Basic are a couple of different ways. The old-fashioned way was REM, and then we could comment anything we wanted to write after that, and the compiler would ignore everything on this line. Today we now use the apostrophe to use the remarking, and then we can write anything we want afterwards on that. We can also have another form of comment. I'll talk about that later on, what's called an inline comment. But let's first of all comment and document this code. So I already have a boilerplate that I'm going to use, so I'm going to grab it real quickly and drop it in place. So let's grab the boilerplate of what I would put at the top of my program. Okay. And so I'm going to come over here and paste that boilerplate in place. And you'll see that what I've got is the company's copyright block, so that if I'm working for a company, I want to make certain that we have the copyright information in place. Then you'll see down on line 12 the name of the program, a very simple calculator. And then since I'm creating this one, I'm the author, and so I put my name in here and the general date on which I created it. I don't become too specific because during the creation process it might take a number of days before I have it actually created. Then I have a very simple description of what this program is to do, what it is about. In this case, we're just talking about designing a program and also documenting the program. And so this is the description area that I've coded in. And notice all these lines begin with the apostrophe, which means the compiler will not recognize this, and it will be just seen as comments that the user or the programmer can see. Then if we have modification history, let's say we go in and later on change something, we want to document what changes were made to our code. Now imagine we have thousands of lines of code. Well, if a programmer goes in and modifies something, we need a quick way to find out what they have modified. So we put in the date of the modification, and then we put in perhaps like our initials, in my case it's JLB, and the first modification number that I'm doing, and a brief description of the modification I'm performing. And every programmer that would later on go in here would also add a date, their initials, and increment their modification number as they make changes, so that if later on we have a problem with the code, we can go back and say, okay, what was the last modification, who made it? Maybe we can refer it back to the person who made it, or we can at least scan on their initials in the code, because we'll put a comment in for their initials so we can find that code. So we always want to have a descriptive block at the top on that. And I'm going to add also one other little line here. We talked about using the option strict, and this instructs the compiler to always make certain it catches our narrowing of code, option strict. We're going to turn this on, and that takes care of that part of the code on that. Now you notice I put in white spaces. For the compiler, white spaces are ignored, so it makes documentation easier for us to see. So basically now I've got this kind of information in place. There's another kind of documentation I'd like to make as well, and that is on the program project area. I'm going to come up to the project and highlight that, not the form, but the project itself. And I'm going to go hit the properties, a little wrench in Solution Explorer, to go to the behind the scenes to the properties of the whole project. And you'll see that the project in its application area has a number of different properties, and we'll see our assembly name is the name of the program we gave at the very beginning, and our root namespace. And that's why I did not use any underscores or spaces when I chose the name of the project in the very beginning. It makes it a little bit more messy if I have spaces in there, because the system has to insert underscores for any place I have spaces. It has to be a full one name type naming convention for these assembly and root namespaces. Now, one of the things that you'll take advantage of later on is what's called the assembly information button. And I'm going to click on this, and you'll see here's where I can change the title, and here I'll change it from very simple as one big word, make it 2 words, and I'm going to put in my company. In this case, I'll call it Bolen Computers. And the product is going to be a very simple calculator. On that, we can add some other information on that to it, but we also want to add our description. And once again, I can get that description. I'm going to pull this up real quick to grab some descriptive information that I've already written out, and I'm going to copy that and drop it into my description. And so I'll have that in place. Now, the important thing about this and filling this area out, the assembly information in the project's properties area, is that when we bring up the about box, or maybe even take advantage of the splash box in our program development, we can pull in these values into our program and read this information directly into it. Also, as we compile and generate the code, this information will be part of that code. So I put in the title, and here's where I can't put in the spaces on that, and my company and the description of the program. So that's all done under the application area of the properties of the project in Solution Explorer. I'm going to hit Save All, and then I'm going to close out the properties window. So I've got that set. I've got my header information to my project itself. Now let's talk about this. This is our code that we have, and one of the first things that's very helpful is to document each of the procedures that are taking place. So we have 5 event handlers. Each of these has the handles keyword for these subroutines, and when this add button is clicked, this procedure will execute. And so what is good is to also document each of these activities. So I'm going to go back to my boilerplate information I have, and our first one we have to bring in is the add first. And I'm going to copy this over and put this back. And what we would do here is simply put in a comment. Now I can type that in, but I put it in with the apostrophe, and you'll notice this is in the color green, which shows me that it is a document comment type. In this case, it's what's called a full line comment. It will not be seen by the compiler, but it will be seen by anybody looking at the source code, so they know right away that the purpose of this particular procedure is to add a first number to a second number and show the sum. We also want to do that for each of the other ones too. So I'm going to quickly put in the boilerplate stuff that I already have written to save some time, so that we can quickly see how to do that. I'm going to bring in the top one here. Back over here. I'm going to put one in here. And then I'm going to come down here and put another one in for the multiply. I'm using a Control-C, Control-V kind of activity to copy and paste this in. But once again, I could just type this in slowly in place. And let me finish up with the clear button on that. Okay, so at this point we've documented what is going to be happening in each of those event handlers on that. At this point, what is helpful is another type of comment. We've seen how I can comment code. There's one called a to-do comment. And anytime I type in to-do, if something very special happens, and we'll see this in a minute, I'm going to cut and paste in from my pseudocode. If you'll remember correctly, back in the beginning I had my pseudocode written here, and I basically am taking this information and I'm going to be putting this in with the to-do colon in front of it. So let's go ahead and do that process. So I'm going to grab my to-dos for that first module, and I'm going to put it in here. Okay, get a little white space. And I'll do that also for the others. Here's where I got the declare variables, convert text to string, and string to a numeric data type or types. And then I'm going to process and calculate the sum, and then convert that sum back into a string for outputting to the screen. So those are the things that have to happen in this particular procedure. And I'm going to do that for the rest. Then I'm going to show you why I use that to do on that. So let me go in and quickly add the other to-dos on that. And this is where my pseudocode is very helpful. Even if you don't have the pseudocode done ahead of time, taking time to put in the pseudocode in your code will help clarify the things that you need to do in your project. So now I'm at the multiplication area. So grab those in, copy, and put the multiplication code in. And then I'm going to do the division one on that. Okay. And then the last one is our clear area. Okay. And this one only has 2 activities in the clear. Okay, now, why did I do the to-do on that? And I want to show you. All these have the to-do prefix with the apostrophe to say this is a comment. Now, I'm going to go over to View and go to Other Windows. And under the Other Windows is what's called Task List. Or I could hit the Control-Alt-K. And I'm going to hit the Task List. And you'll see now, so I bring the window a little bit bigger, all those tasks have come in. And so basically I have a list of things that I need to do to make this program work. And because I've turned on line numbers in the options area, I can see when I see the line numbers over here what line numbers I'm looking at. And in fact, as I go through the list, I can just double click down here at on the task list, and it'll take me right to the spot where I'm working on that. So this saves a lot of time in coding if we create, first of all, some pseudocode with a to-do statement. Even if I don't have this kind of detailed information, if I have just stating to do, add code for this handle, then I will know to come back and work on this later on, so that before I finish my project I can look at the task list and see in fact that I have all my tasks completed on that. So now we've got that done. Let's just review real quickly some of the things of commenting. We have our header block for the company for copyright types of information. We have our program name, the author who created the program, or it could be the company name here, the date created, and then a brief description about that. And then we see the history modification block as we add changes to it. Here we also see the compiler directive to turn option strict on, and then we see our different event handlers that we've coded in and the to-dos that need to be done behind it. Now as I go in and work on each of these, all I have to do is come in here and take this part of it out like that, and it'll now will become a comment to the code below. For example, this first one would be a declare. So I do a dim, and I'm going to have first number as double on that declared, and I'll do that for the other one. I have 3 variables that I had in my design as second number, and the reason I'm using the double data type is so I can have decimal point type values on that. And for this one, since we're doing the sum, I'm going to declare a value called sum. Okay, and at this point, I have my to-do list of declaring the variables, and I've got that done. Well, at this point, we've gone through and we've commented our code to begin with. We put a header to our code documenting about the program, when it was created, who created it, any modifications that might be taking place over time in there at the top of our code. Then I've also turned on the option strict, turning it on to tell the compiler that I want it to watch, that when I narrow fields down, that I'm doing it consciously. And then we'll take those to-do comments where I have the apostrophe to-do colon, and I'll go through my task list and then write the code that I need to put in. Also, you saw that I went to the project area and went to the properties of the project, to the assembly button, and keyed in the information that I'd like eventually the user to see when the code is compiled. And we can also take advantage of that information in the properties area of the assembly information for other screens that we'll use later on, like the about window type thing, or the splash box we might have in our program as it loads in. So it's good to document, and especially as you create code that has many, many lines of code, you'll want to in comments using the apostrophe and whatever you need to say in there that instructs someone else later on, or even to remind yourself what you did in that code, or what the purpose of the code that's going to be shown below does. That way, when we try to look at the code and modify it later on, or understand that code, we can quickly see what was in the mind of the programmer, what they were trying to do at that point in the code. So get in the habit of commenting and documenting your program so that your code will be there and you can come back years from now, look at it, and know what you did, and probably you'll see that you also have improved over the years as well. So until next time, we'll get back in and finish up our project and get our simple calculator finished. And until next time, get your hands dirty in the code. Begin to learn how to comment your codes using the apostrophe and making a little mod box type of thing for yourself, so that you can bring in, like I did, a boilerplate of information that I might put into any program that I would write in the future. So take care.